He says, assisted in the clandestine travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists who carried out the September 11 terrorist attacks in the United States. Right, Soleimani, he's saying. There's actually no evidence of this. The 9/11 Commission report says nothing. Soleimani's name does not appear anywhere in it. And it unequivocally says, quote, there is no evidence Iran was involved in 9/11. Now, yeah, some of the hijackers traveled through Iran, which is what Pence was saying. But that was long before the plot was organized. This was back when they were just guys. Of course, it was Mike Pence who, on the floor of the House of Representatives in 2004, said, and I quote, weapons of mass destruction have been found. By the way, you'll find a great summary of this over in Judd Legum's newsletter at popular.info. And it turns out that Trump was given multiple options. So do you think that Trump's re-election strategy and his anti-impeachment strategy is going to work? Or is this going to backfire on him?
We say fight back!
Today we're reading from It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America by David K. Johnston. This is from page 61, the chapter titled Forgetting the Forgotten Man. In 2010, the U.S. Department of Labor created a website to honor workers who died on the job. Quote, more than 4,500 workers, lose their lives on the job every year. Below are the names of just a few who have died in recent months. OSHA's mission is to prevent workplace injuries, illnesses, and death, end quote. That Occupational Safety and Health Administration webpage was intended to highlight and humanize workplace deaths, to ensure awareness of tragedies, especially those that could have been avoided, according to Jordan Barab, an Assistant Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. Barab explained, without information like this, fatality statistics are just raw, sterile numbers. The purpose of adding names and circumstances was to impress people with the tragedy that workers and their families face day after day. In August 2017, Trump's Labor Department quietly removed the preamble and the names when it killed the web page. It also took down, without public announcement, the fatality inspection data for all years prior to 2017. Those were just two of many other Trump administration actions inimical to worker safety. Others included no longer posting press releases about deaths resulting from unsafe working conditions, delaying rules to reduce sickness and death from inhaling silica and beryllium at work, delaying rules to lower the risk of railroad engineers and truck drivers falling asleep at the switch or wheel because of untreated sleep apnea, and the appointment to the Supreme Court of a judge who held that a company had the right to fire a worker who chose not to freeze to death on the job. A reasonable person listening to Donald Trump's inaugural address would never have expected these and other actions, assuming he believed what Trump said. Trump declared, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no more. You came by the tens of millions to become part of a historic movement, the likes of which the world has never seen before. At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens," end quote. Those men and women were forgotten again the following week. And it's not just workers whose interests were forgotten, not to mention who were put in danger. By deciding not to implement a rule to reduce the chances of truck drivers and train operators falling asleep at the wheel, Trump put at risk the lives of families on the highway, people riding on passenger trains, and many others. The White House called it President Trump's war on regulation. In his weekly radio address in early May, he declared that we've removed one job-killing regulation after another, and they're not pretty, and they're going. And believe me, we're just getting started on regulations. They're gone. Removal of data on workplace deaths, which averaged 13 per day, infuriated Jordan Barab, who was Obama's number 2 at OSHA. As a private citizen, Barab created a web page to keep track of the names of the dead and the reasons they were killed on the job. He called it, "OSHA won't tell you who died in the workplace, we will." After the election, Barab's concerns that the Trump administration would be bad for workers increased when he asked where the Trump was and learned that none was coming. Each incoming administrator sends people to scope out federal agencies, learn who does what, and get a feel for the place in advance. Then the incoming administration sends its landing team, the people who will initially implement its policies for each agenda, or at each agency. When no beachhead team came up, Barab figured it meant worker safety simply was not a priority for Trump. He hoped that was the worst of it, nothing more than apathy about worker safety. But when the landing team arrived, Barab realized trouble was coming for American workers, and it was not official apathy, but the start of assaults on workers' rights and safety. Barab said most of them had no idea they were going to labor and no interest in workers' issues either. What they did have was a mandate to delay, repeal, or weaken regulations that protected workers as part of Trump's plan to eliminate, quote, any regulation that is outdated, unnecessary, bad for workers, or contrary to the national interest, end quote. The first sign came when Trump nominated Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Gorsuch was an acolyte of Antonin Scalia, whose seat he would be taking. Like Scalia, he said statutes should be literally read, and if that made no sense, well, that was a problem for Congress. Also like Scalia, he had a habit of consulting dictionaries, often following Scalia's practice of relying on the third, fourth, or even lesser definition of a word when it supported his jurisprudence. Trump's nomination alarmed unions. Jody Calamine, a communications worker of America lawyer, told Gorsuch's Senate confirmation hearing that Gorsuch, quote, is a threat to working people's health and safety, end quote. Calamine cited Gorsuch's dissent in the 2016 case to make this his point. That dissent, he said, reveals an anti-worker bias and features a judicial activism that will ultimately put workers' lives at risk, end quote. Those are unusually strong words about a Supreme Court nominee, but a review of the case shows Gorsuch has little regard for human life, at least when it comes to employers' power over their workers. He considers a rigid interpretation of the law more important. The case was about a law Congress passed giving workers the right to refuse dangerous tasks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It's the end of the week, the beginning of the weekend. It's Anything Goes Friday. It's you and me for the 3 hours. No guests today. I want to talk about the broken man is breaking America. Also, Supreme Court, 2 major Supreme Court rulings coming down. We'll talk about those in just a moment. Does this open the door for the end of birthright citizenship? We'll see. Also, in the second hour of our program, this isn't just about Gavin Newsom suing so-called Fox News. This is about Trump and about morality for America. And have Republicans reached the point of no return, no matter what they do in the second hour? In the third hour of our program, Trump has decided that it's a crime to be unpatriotic, and he's decided you have to be loyal to dear leader to be patriotic. The good news is the fight back. We'll get into that as well. But first off, the Supreme Court has made a couple of decisions. The first one, this is Sonia Sotomayor's dissent. Well, actually, just in summary, basically what they did was they limited the ability of federal judges to temporarily pause basically anything going nationwide. This cuts both ways. You'll recall Matthew Kaczmarek, the judge in Amarillo, federal judge in Amarillo, Texas, tried to ban mifepristone nationwide. On the other hand, his ban was immediately stopped by the circuit court, the appeals court above him. That's how it's always worked up until now, and it seems to have worked pretty reasonably. But this is pretty wild. And the birthright citizenship part of it, they didn't actually rule on at all. They just put that on pause for 30 days. Instead, in the 6-3 decision, which was written by Amy Coney Barrett, they basically said, you know, the ability of federal judges to, just freeze stuff nationwide is severely limited, shall we say. Not entirely done away with. What it reminds me of, and I realize this is an extraordinarily imperfect analogy, is the Dred Scott decision. Roger Taney, the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1856 or 57, and Dred Scott ruled that regardless of whether they were in free territory or in Confederate territory, that black people who were enslaved or not enslaved could be enslaved. Basically, all black persons in the United States simply had no rights as citizens. And Abraham Lincoln, when he became president, basically said, yeah, that's a pretty terrible thing for poor Mr. Scott, Mr. Dred Scott, but I'm not going to apply it to everybody else, which was sort of the logic that the Supreme Court applied today. Sonia Sotomayor, the justice, she said, and this is from her dissent. I just read her dissent and Kagan's dissent. Jackson's dissent. She said, under this decision, no right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. Today, the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people from certain faiths from gathering to worship. The majority holds that absent cumbersome class action litigation, courts cannot completely enjoin even such plainly unlawful policies unless doing so is the formal party's complete relief. The majority ignores entirely whether the president's executive order is constitutional, instead focusing only on the question whether federal courts have the equitable authority to issue universal injunctions. Yet the order's patent unlawfulness reveals the gravity, so she's calling Trump unlawful, reveals the gravity of the majority's error and underscores why equity supports universal injunctions as appropriate remedies in this kind of case. As every conceivable source of law confirms, birthright citizenship is the law of the land. And then, she goes on with regard to that. With regard to Justice Jackson, she said the court's decision to permit the executive to violate the Constitution with respect to anyone who has not yet sued is an existential threat to the rule of law. She said it's important to recognize that the executive's bid to vanquish so-called universal injunctions is, at bottom, a request for the request for this court's permission to engage in unlawful behavior. She says what this court has done is to, quote, endorse the creation of a zone of lawlessness within which the executive has the prerogative to take or leave the law as it wishes, and where individuals who would otherwise be entitled to the law's protection become subject to the executive's whims instead. This is Justice Kagan's dissent. She said the majority ignores the judiciary's foundational duty to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States. This is one of the big complaints. Basically, the court just weakened itself. She said, she goes on to say, it is also profoundly dangerous since it gives the executive, the president, the go-ahead to sometimes wield the kind of unchecked arbitrary power the founders crafted our Constitution to eradicate. The very institution our founding charter charges with the duty to ensure universal adherence to the law now requires judges to shrug and turn their backs to intermittent lawlessness. She said it also obscures a far more basic question of enormous legal and practical significance. May a federal court in the United States order the president to follow the law? She says to ask this question is to answer it. In a constitutional republic such as ours, the federal court has the power to order the executive to follow the law, and it must. She says, thus, everyone from the president on down is bound by the law. But her complaint here in this dissent, and she goes, on at some considerable length, is that the court just said, no, we're not going to force the president to follow the law. So, wild stuff. My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled "The Broken Man Who's Breaking America," and in it I kind of tease my next book. It's coming out this fall. It's called "The Last American President: A Broken Man, a Corrupt Party, and a World on the Brink." And in that book, I described Trump's upbringing and how, basically it screwed him up, and how what you could call sociopathy. I'm not diagnosing Trump as a psychopath or as a sociopath, although we've had multiple psychiatrists on this program who have done so. But instead, he's behaving in ways that are consistent with being a sociopath. Your basic, according to the DSM, actually it's called antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. The characteristics are a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others, chronic violation of social norms, rules, and laws, deceitfulness, impulsivity, and aggression, and a near complete lack of remorse or empathy. And, this is what we're seeing in Donald Trump. Now, the word sociopath gets thrown around a lot, and, most people don't really understand what it means. And so here's a simple definition. If you give a child a test for sociopathy, for is this person a sociopath? Children will almost always indicate that they are sociopaths because they're still in the stage of me, my, mine. They have not yet fully socialized. They haven't fully developed empathy. They haven't fully come to understand the needs and rights and things of others. And what Trump did in his first term was basically surrounded himself with adults. What he has done in this term is surround himself with suck-up yes men, essentially, people who share many of his behaviors and his weaknesses. And this is a bad thing for a country. I mean, we've seen this before. What happens when you get somebody who is profoundly mentally disabled in this regard? We saw this, Hitler and Heydrich, for example, or Goebbels. And they surround themselves with people who are similarly disabled, we say. So, this is something that I think is important to consider, that we are being led by a man who doesn't have a lot of regard for the norms of society. I mean, his whole grabbing women by the crotch thing, and I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and his multiple convictions for fraud and things like that are, fairly good evidence of that, I would argue. And now the Supreme Court, with this decision this morning, just handed him a whole lot more power. What say you?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, and also the Supreme Court says book banning is just, I'll get into that in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Hang on just a second here. Let me just get one thing printed, and I will be back with you. There we go. All right, let's pick up some calls here. Mark in Signal Hill, California. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Well, I was asking a question about, I wonder if all these so-called ICE agents are actually January 6th rioters who were pardoned and recruited, because that'd be a perfect reason for them to hide their faces and show no ID and follow.
I've wondered the same thing, Mark.
What's that?
I've wondered the same thing.
Yeah, that's anyhow. I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah. Typically, if you're hiding your face, you're ashamed of what you're doing, or you don't want to be caught. And, you're trying to avoid accountability. And accountability should be the essence of, the responsibility of any federal employee or any government employee.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, crush ICE, make America cool again.
Yes. Something's going on. Mark,
okay.
Mark, thanks for the call. Kevin in Cedar Lake, Indiana. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to make a comment here. We're operating under a false paradigm that somehow Donald Trump is the head of a political party. I don't believe that it is anymore, and we have to stop thinking of it as a Republican Party. It's basically a white supremacist Taliban Trump cult. And, you know, all of the things that you mentioned about his personal, you know, shortcomings are all measured in the same way that I view my own disease of addiction. People, addicts always get enablers and codependents to surround them just so they don't have to deal with reality. You know, and the important thing, the reason why I really called is a passing of note. On PBS NewsHour last night, they paid tribute to Bill Moyers, the former press secretary to LBJ. He was a Baptist, ordained Baptist minister, wrote a powerful book, The Power of Myth, with Joseph Campbell. Back in 1988, on a personal note, I was struggling with my own. That was the year I started my recovery. And it was his book and the PBS programs that he had on while Joseph Campbell was dying from pancreatic cancer, you know, to actually have this seminal work be part of his legacy. And during that tribute, that would help me with my personal ideas of what a higher power is. It's not an outside agency. It is, in fact, an inner reality. And it's why I became more involved in Buddhism. But to get to the point, there was Bill Moyers was actually talking as one of his journals, in one of his journals on the program, where he was talking about the entitlement. What did he call it? The entitled mercenary class of politicians back in 2013. And it was like almost prescient what he was saying about what we are experiencing right now. Whether or not Donald Trump, I know personally that Donald Trump is a mess. You know, so
no, I got it.
It's another way to define it.
I had dinner with Bill Moyers and his wife at the home of Norman Lear and his wife in Vermont, the old Robert Frost estate, many years ago, about a decade ago, and spent a lot of time talking to Bill. We spent the whole weekend.
Beautiful man.
Yeah, just a remarkable man. His wife is also brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So back when Donald Trump debated Kamala Harris, he was asked about world leaders and whatnot, and he went off on this thing praising a guy named Viktor Orban and saying he's a tough guy, he's smart, he's the prime minister of Hungary, and he loves me, basically. So who is Viktor Orban? Well, it turns out Viktor Orban is a guy who took over Hungary in a regular election, the prime minister, and then turned it into basically a neo-fascist paradise for right-wingers. All the media is now controlled by right-wing oligarchs. He's packed the courts. He's changed the Constitution so that they have things like gerrymandering and voter suppression, so he always wins every election. He throws people in jail for criticizing him, even on Facebook. I mean, this is what Hungary has become. Fox News loves it. Tucker Carlson did his show from there for a week, and that's what Donald Trump wants to do to America. You can read the whole thing over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Trump's New Hero, the strong man who crushed democracy in Hungary. Check it out.
He was raised in a house with no tender embrace, where the smile was a mask and love left no trace. A cold father's shadow, a mother withdrawn, taught him to lie before he could yawn. Now he struts like a king with a gold-plated frown, breaking rules, breaking hearts, tearing all the way down. No remorse in his chest, no shame in his eyes, just a child in a suit, spinning rage into lies. He's the broken man who's breaking America. Wounds never healed, now he's dragging us through. He don't feel your pain, but he'll sell it back to you and laugh as he stomps on the red, white, and blue. A broken man who's breaking America. But we won't let him finish what he came here to do. He surrounds himself with cowards and cruel little boys, trading power for loyalty like cheap plastic toys. They cheer when he bullies, they kneel when he roars, but no one is safe when a child runs the war. He's the tantrum in the courtroom, the lie on the stage, the thin-skinned messiah of a digital age. But this ain't a game, and this ain't pretend. It's our future at stake if we don't make it end. He's the broken man who's breaking America, a hollowed out soul with the flags in his grip. He don't build, he don't lead, he just burns like a character in a fable where decency starts to slip. Yeah, the broken man who's breaking America.
Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. So the other major Supreme Court decision this morning was based on a lawsuit by some Muslim parents in Maryland who argued that their children should not, in a public school, be forced to read or listen to the reading of a book about two men who fall in love, a prince and a knight, specifically. I shared this with you a couple days ago about the story, and it's called Pride. One of the books is called Pride Puppy, another is Love Violent, another is Born Ready, etc. But anyhow, the Supreme Court, again in a 6-3 decision, said no, you're violating parents' right to raise their children in the context of the religion that they want to do so. So, there's that too. That doesn't surprise me so much, frankly, except for the fact that gay marriage is legal in the United States. You wonder if the book had been about, for example, evolution. Could the Supreme Court rule, or would the Supreme Court have ruled that, parents who object to evolution on religious grounds should not be subject to that? I mean, which was a Scopes monkey trial, right? Back in the day with William Jennings Bryant, I believe it was, arguing the state's side, saying, no, the state should be able to censor such teaching in the public schools. I mean, where does this begin and end? Is it just around gay people? What about, people who claim to have a religious objection to people living next door to them who are Muslim or who are black or who are, some other religion or whatever? I mean, once the court begins sanctioning what I would argue is bigotry based on religion, where does it stop? Which was the basis of the dissents, by the way, in that argument, in that case, in this case. I think it's extremely problematic because basically what the court is saying is your religion trumps public schools, and I think you could build an argument were gay marriage not legal in the United States, that having a book about two boys falling in love or two men falling in love with each other, because it doesn't represent a legal behavior in the United States, maybe the Supreme Court could have said, well, that's one of those gray areas where you can argue religion and things like that. But this is legal. This was decided by the Supreme Court itself, the Obergefell decision. So saying that a book can't depict a behavior that is completely within the boundaries of American law strikes me as bizarre, and also tells me that next year this court is probably going to go after gay marriage. Stay tuned. What say you? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'll be right back with you. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. This is from the introduction, titled The Big Picture of Social Control versus Democracy. This book deals with two very large and often amorphous concepts, privacy and surveillance in the context of government and the marketplace. Both concepts have undergone changes over the millennia of recorded human history, and those changes have dramatically sped up and expanded over the past few centuries, starting with the widespread use of the printing press in the mid to late 15th century, when books and newspapers began to proliferate across Europe, and in the rest of the civilized world by the end of the 17th century, civilized in quotes. The development of radio, television, and the internet in the 20th century heightened the need to define more clearly what both concepts meant and how they applied both to governments, the public sector, and to individual and corporate players, the private sector. The thought police and Big Brother are terms introduced into the popular lexicon by George Orwell in his novel 1984. Big Brother was the overweening, all-powerful government of Orwell's novel, and the thought police were those who managed to burrow so deeply into every citizen's behavior, speech, and even thoughts that they could control or punish behavior based on the slightest deviations from orthodoxy. Orwell was only slightly off the mark. Big Brother types of government and thought police types of social control are now widespread in the world and incompatible with democracy, as I'll show in more detail later in the book. Most concerning for Americans and citizens of other democratic nations, in quote, the mentality of both has heavily infiltrated both American government and corporate sectors, reaching so deeply into the day-to-day details of our lives that the techniques and technologies they use can and do not only control, but predict our behavior. The goals of those who violate privacy and use surveillance is almost always social control and behavior modification. Setting aside pure voyeurism, these are the areas where money is made, power is accumulated, and political or business goals are reached. And whether they are of government or of corporate Big Brother, the goals are largely the same and consistent with those just mentioned. Secrets are now for government and giant corporations to know and hold, but not for average people. And they're used by Big Brother to both acquire and hold power. J. Edgar Hoover had secrets to hide, for example, so he knew well their power. A gay man at the pinnacle of American power for most of his life, the FBI director knew that in many U.S. states, he and his lover, Clyde Tolson, could be prosecuted and sent to prison for their private, consensual behavior. Yet Hoover and Tolson lived together, and their relationship was an open secret among Washington's cognoscenti. I still remember a beautiful summer day in Ireland, Louise and I sitting in the living room of author Anthony Summers and his wife Robin, as they described to us the shocking details of Hoover's life and abuses of power they'd uncovered writing Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover. That books like Summers weren't published until after Hoover's death is a striking testimonial to the power of surveillance and the blackmail material it can produce to keep powerful people's secrets hidden even from the world's best investigative journalists. Every politician or reporter of any consequence knew that Hoover had a file on him. They were almost all men back then, and powerful men at that time were far more likely to harbor salacious secrets, ensuring Hoover an unbroken hold over the FBI from its founding in 1935 to his 1977 death. But Hoover didn't use his massive FBI surveillance powers just to cow politicians and reporters. He was also interested in advancing policies close to his heart. A dedicated white supremacist running an FBI where all meaningful power was held in white hands throughout his life, Hoover, or an underling at his behest, famously sent FBI surveillance tapes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. having an extramarital affair to the civil rights leader himself, implying that they'd next go to his wife and the public if he didn't commit suicide. Hoover also spent his entire career downplaying the role of Italian organized crime in the United States because, among other things, mafia godfather Santo Trafficante had the goods on his sexual orientation and regularly hosted him and Tolson for gambling junkets. When, in 1961, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy overruled Hoover and began prosecuting the mob, with the number of cases brought shooting up from dozens annually to over 700 a year in the early 1960s. The mafia backlash eventually destroyed the Kennedy dynasty. There's a more modern story of how surveillance and invasions of privacy have impacted American politics. The rise to the presidency of serial rapist, wannabe fascist, and crooked businessman Donald Trump. The biggest big brother of the corporate world, Facebook, had for years been compiling massive troves of personal data on Americans, even Americans without a Facebook account, as any page with a Facebook logo on it can send your browsing activity back to Facebook. And sometime in the mid-2010s, Cambridge Analytica hired a data scientist to put together an app that could suck down that data without Facebook's knowledge. Cambridge once bragged that they ended up with more than 4,000 data points on each of 230 million Americans. The book, The Hidden History of Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy, by Thom Hartmann. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
To uphold the law, they took the stand. With promises made, they shook our hands. In the name of justice, their word was sworn. But behind closed doors, a clue was born. From oaths to lies, the truth was bent. Twisting precedents with dark intent. A radical agenda they now pursue. This betrayal, democracy they undo. From oaths to lies, a Supreme Court coup. They've turned our laws to serve a few. The fabric of freedom now under threat. Injustice reigns, we won't forget. They've broken trust, our faith betrayed. Each ruling passed, our hopes decayed. Political favors in robes they dress. In shadows deep, our rights suppress. From oaths to lies, the truth was bent. Twisting precedents with dark intent. A radical agenda they now pursue. Democracy they undo. From oaths to lies, the Supreme Court.
So just to recap, my daily take over at HartmannReport.com today is free and available to everybody. It's titled "The Broken Man Who's Breaking America." And, you know, it's essentially what my new book, The Last American President, A Broken Man, a Corrupt Party, and the World on the Brink, which is now available for pre-sale, it'll be out in a month or so, is all about. You know, going back to Donald Trump's childhood and, you know, how he was made and what happened to him. And now, you know, and then ultimately to the people that he surrounds himself with and the danger that it represents to America. So just an FYI. So what's on your mind today? Frank in Thompson Falls, Montana. Hey, Frank, what's up?
Oh, not too much. Thanks for taking my call. It's kind of ironic that you're talking about the Supreme Court. I want everybody as a call to action to write a postcard to the Supreme Court. I sent mine out yesterday, and here's a few sentences of what I wrote. To Judge Kagan, Judge Sotomayor, and Judge Brown Jackson, thank you for standing up for the Constitution and the laws of this country. To the other judges, your greed and ideology is destroying our country and the rule of law. You're nothing but political hacks who are members of the Lewis F. Powell's Club. Your unchristian and un-American beliefs. Oh, wait a minute here. Excuse me. You're imposing your un-American and un-Christian beliefs on the people of this country. In closing, the Christian nationalism is nothing but American Taliban.
Remarkable. Yeah, it's pretty much the only way to communicate with them, I believe, is to send a postcard to the Supreme Court to
well,
to
if
individual
you
justice.
send a letter to them, it has to go through anthrax and all this other stuff. Whereas if you send a postcard, it goes directly to the judges.
Yeah, I get it.
Or their team, anyway.
There you go, Frank. Thanks.
But yeah, we just need to flood those guys with a ton of postcards and tell them that they're not representing the citizens of the United States, which they already know that anyway.
Yeah, I continue to think and I don't want to discourage you from doing that. I think it's a fine thing to let the third branch of government know what we think of the job that they're doing. That said, I suspect that the billionaire gifts that are being showered down upon the right wingers on the court are probably going to have more influence than you and me. But keep it up, Frank. Good on you. Thank you very much for the call. Samuel in Santa Ana, California. Hey, Samuel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I wanted to tell you something to send you off on a great vacation. Oftentimes, people who are well-meaning, they ask you, what are you going to do if they come for you? We are a listener-sponsored radio show. So the question more appropriately is, what are we going to do if they come for you? So what I'm calling to tell you today is that I have a $50 bill in my pocket with your name on it. And that if anybody ever comes at you and you have some legal fees or whatever it happens to be, and I guarantee you there are thousands and thousands of listeners who feel the same way that I do, that I will send that to whatever address that you want me to send it to. This is coming directly from me, boots on the ground, to you, boots on the air. You are a national treasure. We need to carry this thing all the way through until the next election and beyond. We need to stay focused and ready and able to voice our opinions and to trade our ideas and concepts. So want to let you know, from me, boots on the ground, you boots on the air, I love you. I really do.
Well, thank you, Samuel. Just a heads up, Daily Kos has apparently been something by the federal government. Marcos Molitsas posted over there yesterday that he can't talk about it, so apparently there's a gag order associated with it, or it's grand jury proceedings, but that they're raising money right now to defend themselves. So somebody got in line ahead of me here. You might want to check that out. It's at dailykos.com. But Samuel, thanks for your kind words. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. And thanks for the heads up on Daily Kos.
Yeah, you're welcome. Roger in Seattle. Hey, Roger, what's up?
I want to continue that theme of attaboy, and thank you and your wife for doing the 225 version of folk songs. I hope maybe someday you'll do a Peter, Paul, and Mary tribute or a Beach Boys tribute, of have a group of singers to do like a Beach Boys rendition of some of your fine lyrics and something like that. Anyway, for us old people that are in our 70s, like I am.
California surfer style, huh? I'll pass that along to Louise.
But since I have a little more time here, I wanted to retread the idea of humor and maybe mentioning earlier that maybe bending it towards ridicule isn't the way to go. So what if we just did riffs on previous things that worked? So, for example, Carter had zero-based budgeting, but the way that Trump and Musk did it, it was zero-ignorant budgeting, so ZIB instead of ZBB.
Okay.
So, in that sense, maybe try to go at a political humor angle and then maybe turn that into a contest so that the best one of the week gets mentioned on Friday or something like that from all of the submissions that you get the previous week or whatever it takes, however long it takes your staff to pick a winner, maybe every 2 weeks or something that you'd have that winner announced on Friday.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm all in favor of humor, Roger. And, from time to time, somebody will call in with a great joke. So, Roger.
I wanted to follow up as a second the Buddhists that, yes, let's look to some other faith traditions for reasons for hope, like Martin Luther King looked to Gandhi, and I think we ought to see from worldwide what are reasons to believe that Martin Luther King was right, that the arc of justice is long but bends towards justice. And I think we don't have to just depend on Will Rogers and some other humorists and philosophers from the United States. We can look to Dalai Lama and Gandhi, and some Buddhists that are also worthy.
Yeah.
And I certainly like Moyer's pointing to Star Wars, and the Force be with you type idea as a way of teaching spiritual values.
Yeah, no, I get it, Roger. Well said. Thank you. Bob in Melbourne, Florida. Hey, Bob. Thanks for listening to WMNF. What's up?
Oh, always. Ding dong. Here comes another one for the front porch here, Tom.
Okay.
A lot of people are mentioning the right down the road from me here, the alligator Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's that there's only one way out of the place, and that is through a swamp of carnivorous critters.
Yeah.
No, there's two ways out of there, because the place was originally built to be the largest airport in the world. That project was shut down in the 60s by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and it sat vacant all these years, and there's two ways out of there. The other way is this place can accommodate 747s and C-5 Galaxies.
Yeah, it's got a 14,000-foot runway.
Yeah, and if I wanted to mass deport people surreptitiously, out of the view of just about anybody, I think I'd pick a place in the middle of nowhere that got a huge runway.
Yeah.
I mean, this place is between the Big Cypress Swamp and the Everglades. This place is it's in a place where the Seminoles used to call the boondocks.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if you wanted to mass deport people, there is no finer way to do it. And nobody is mentioning any of that. They're just saying there's no way out of there. Yeah, there is a way out of there, baby.
Yeah.
And I think that is right on the radar.
Yeah, think about it. That's concerning. Thank you, Bob. That's an interesting point. Wayne, over-the-road trucker, where are you today, Wayne?
Right at the moment, I'm in Detroit, Texas.
Okay, so what's
anyway? Hey, Tom, I have a close friend that I've known since he was 13 years old. That he is now in Pakistan, a Sharia law lawyer. I also have a close friend that's an imam. And I asked them, how can you be friends with me, especially my friend that's a lawyer? How can you be friends with me knowing that I am not one of your fellow believers? And the quote unquote back to me was, Sharia law only pertains to those who follow Islam. Wait, what? So you've lived in these different places. You've lived all over the world. Why are these things that are not told? But that was not my point in the call. My point in the call is, calling somebody socialist, and they keep saying that Zoran is a communist. There's a big difference there.
Yeah, there's a huge world of difference.
Right, and I have why nobody talks about the fact that you in your offline, for those of us that have been on hold, it'd be nice if everybody could hear it. But socialist programs in the United States. Let's see. How about the $40 billion with the B that gets paid out every single year to the farmers? Guess what? Those are big farmers, because you basically have to have a whole.
Or the $600 billion that goes to the fossil fuel industry and subsidies.
Exactly, 500. What was it? It's $585 billion.
Yeah, the Price-Anderson Act supporting the nuclear power industry. Another example of socialism. No, we have socialism for the rich and for the corporate, Wayne, but not for the average person. And with regard to religions only speaking to their own people, I mean, that's typically how it works. These are our rules for our tribe, essentially. Wayne, thanks for the call. 47 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's talk media for the sane among us. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Trying to stay sane.
That's a good step.
Yep. But first, I watched a thing on CBS, and they were talking about how Social Security is going to be broke in 33, so we're going to have a cut in our checks, or everybody's going to have to pay more into it, not wants to mention the cap. But that wasn't really called. I was so angry over the parade that I couldn't really watch TV for about 2 weeks. But I have been walking around asking people when the Constitution was signed. And when I tell them September of 87, they look at me like, what? I said, yes. The Declaration was signed in 76. So in 75, Thomas Jefferson and the crowd, the gang, got together and appointed George Washington as general of the colonial army. Mm-hmm. And this Jefferson actually thought that he would get it and was his nose was out of joint a bit, but that was their decision. And so when we celebrated the creation of the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, I got kind of upset because it wasn't until the Constitution was signed and there was actually legal right to create an army. That was in 87. And it just really angered me. And so I've been going around asking people, do they think that Trump has violated the Article 1 or Article 2 of the Constitution? And they look at me funny. I said, well, you need to pull out your copy of the Constitution and pull out your Bill of Rights. And they get, oh, I don't have one. And so I've been doing a little commercial for the ACLU because they have a little booklet that has a Constitution in it. And you just send them a donation and you'll get one. But these people, that when I'm out walking and talking and I'm asking these questions, they say, well, I didn't think Trump would go this far. And so there is a break here. But when they cut, this is a red state, a very poor state of a lot of poor white people. And they still think that only black people, lazy, no good black people, get all of these benefits, and it's their tax money. And trying to teach them that the whole deal is to fix it so that we have like a royalty that does not pay tax, but we pay tax to support them. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling them that I have not adopted a rich person. I have no intention of adopting a rich person. And I am not responsible for their happiness. And they look at me like I'm totally insane.
We all sort of have, Norma, because we're paying Jeff Bezos' taxes. We're paying Elon Musk's taxes.
Yeah, I know. I said it's not right for people to worry about buying shoes for their kids. And the rich people are building their third yacht, so they'll have one in every ocean. Mm. And I said, you don't understand what's going on. Have you watched C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2? And they don't know it exists. Mm. And I tell them I'm just one little old white lady. I'll be 75 in August. Don't expect me to fix this without your help.
There you go.
And everybody else, please do this.
Yeah. No, Norma, you're an inspiration to many people. I mean, we get a lot of calls from people going, yeah, Norma inspired me to get out there and carry some literature around and talk to people in the supermarket. God bless you, Norma. Thank you so much for the call, and it's always so nice to hear from you. It's 51 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. People in the Rust Belt states know all about tariffs. They know that tariffs kept jobs in the Rust Belt states for centuries, that America was built on tariffs. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected in 2016 was because he talked about tariffs. But for some reason right now, the Harris-Walz campaign, or Democrats in general, are reluctant to talk about tariffs. They call them sales taxes or something like that. they really need to be a little more straightforward, because people, particularly in the industrial Midwest, or in the Rust Belt as we call it now, are not dumb. You know, they know what's going on, they know where we've been and how we got here. And I think it's pretty important to be talking about tariffs and what they are, how they work, and how they can bring manufacturing back home. I wrote a piece about it for Hartmann Report. It's titled "Why Trump is Wrong and Alexander Hamilton Was Right About Tariffs." And I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating at hartmannreport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, one of Donald Trump's biggest problems is he really does want to be a great person, and which is why he's always talking about the Nobel Peace Prize.
Mm-hmm.
And Republicans have this.
I don't think he wants to be a great person, but he wants to be thought of as a great person. I think he's too lazy to want to be a great person, but whatever.
No, precisely.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans have this belief that just being president makes you a great person. But for Donald Trump, that's not quite enough for him. And I think it's because throughout his entire life, he has been called hateful, a bad person, evil, corrupt, and by the people that even in his family. Mm-hmm. And so he's grown into this person who is just a partisan, hateful, lying, and absolutist. Mm-hmm. He has had to defend himself as being right all of the time when he was wrong all the time. Mm-hmm. And so he self-identifies himself as being a truth teller, and in fact, he labeled his social media Truth Social, which is a big bald-faced lie. Mm-hmm. And in order for him to actually get away with some of this stuff, he really needs loyalty. Mm-hmm. Because he's decided that the only way he can get that loyalty is to put dumb, stupid people under him, so that he will be the smartest man in the room. And these people will never go against him, and it makes him feel like he's the smartest man in the room. He is the most entitled person, probably next to Elon Musk. But the man hasn't actually accomplished anything. He hasn't earned anything in his life. Yet there are so many people willing to give him money and praise. Well, it's because he's the avatar. He's the guy who stands up and proudly and loudly says, basically, white people should run the country, men should run the country, Christians should run the country. We're going to get rid of all the brown people here in this country. We're going to disempower the black people. We're going to fire a lot of federal employees because there's a lot of black people among them. I mean, I think it's all about race. I really do. And misogyny. And in fact, the people that love him the most are the most racist people in this country. They're the ones that help empower him and look up to him. And because of all of those people, that's why he's back in the White House. And some of these people are powerful people in their own right, including some of these people in our media. Mm. I mean, I watched this guy on Bloomberg, and he just loves Donald Trump, and he thought he was going to get his tax cut right away. He was so happy when the Trump was headed for the White House again, and all he was doing just with this big grin on his face, just waiting for his tax cut. It hasn't happened yet, but it's just amazing to me that these clowns and they look up to a convicted felon, but they will never believe that he is a felon in their own minds.
And a sexual assaulter.
This is yes, a rapist. This is the guy that they love.
Yeah, no, I get it, Larry. I get it. Being a racist will cover a multitude of sins, apparently, in America today.
It will.
At least among white people. Larry, thank you for the call. Always great to hear from you. We'll be back on the other side of the break with more of the news of the day. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare, Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one, too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing, in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down and, as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP. because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Justice Sotomayor, I read to you from parts of her dissent this morning, and she read that live from the bench this morning. This is rare. Justices rarely read their decisions or their dissents, but Sotomayor, and according to the people who were in the courtroom, it apparently really pissed off the conservative justices, the Republican justices. Pretty remarkable. I just, it's actually quite remarkable when you consider, what this is all about. Which brings us to Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson, I think he's been on this show. Didn't he write the book Everything Trump Touches Dies, I think? But anyway, a former Republican guy, consultant, he co-founded the Lincoln Project. And he's talking about how the Build Back Better, or the Big Beautiful Bill, the BBB, is increasingly a poison pill for the Republican Party. He said chances are it will still pass, but the impact next fall will be severe. And then he asks rhetorically why, and points out that basically the numbers are brutal. When people learn about what's in this tax cut for billionaires, gut our Medicaid to pay for it bill, by 2-to-1 margin, they oppose it. He says, once voters learn almost anything about the bill, the support slips. He says the broader electorate sees it for what it is, a reckless, regressive, gold-plated disaster. And for a party obsessed with ratings, this bill is shaping up to be a box office bomb. This is starting to get real interesting because you've got senators who are saying there's parts of this we don't like. You've got members of the House saying, the things the Senate is doing we don't like. The Senate has made it even harder to get Medicaid. I mean, it's just increasingly wild. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom, taking a cue from Dominion Voting Systems, has sued Fox News for $787 million in damages. That's the amount that Dominion got from Fox in their court case. And, it got appealed and it got upheld. And so Gavin Newsom, what he's talking about is when Trump called out the National Guard, he and Trump had a phone conversation, but several days later, or several days before that, they had a phone conversation. But then days later on June 10th, Trump claimed to reporters that the day before, June 9th, he had a phone conversation with Newsom and that, Newsom was basically okay with what Trump was doing. And Newsom immediately went on X and said there was no call, not even a voicemail. Americans should be alarmed that a president deploying Marines into our streets doesn't even know who he's talking to. Trump then reaches out to Fox News with anchor John Roberts and says, here's my screenshot of my call log showing a 16-minute call on June 6th. But see, on the 10th, he had said it was on the 9th. So, yes, there was a call on the 6th. And so, and then Mr. Waters also played a clip of Trump's statement about the call, but removed the president saying that the call occurred a day ago. Excuse me, which was the lie, according to Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom is saying Trump's lying about me, and he's suing him. I'm just not a fan of people suing the media, but that, probably reflects my bias as having been a member of the media since I was a teenager. But I think it's troubling. It's very troubling. So, all that said, what's on your mind today? Let's pick up your calls. It's Anything Goes Weekend. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Well, I have a scheme from here in Idaho, and it's the public lands and this rush to sell them for no reason. And the news is covering the Senate parliamentarian ruling that Senator Lee's addition to the Senate version of selling 2.5 million acres of BLM and Forest Service land doesn't fit the definition of a reconciliation bill. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what they're covering, even on my local news stations here in Idaho. But immediately, Mr. Lee put an amended version in. He eliminated the Forest Service portion of that and just made it BLM land and tried to rein it in and say, well, the sale has to happen within 5 miles of a population area. And that's just 1 million acres right there. Mm. They're not stopping. They've done it before. I'm living here in Idaho, where I am and who I live with. I've been trying to understand, what is it with Utah that this is a bug in their bonnet? They've been doing this for decades. A decade ago, it was Jason Chadwick out of the House. He changed the rules of that particular Congress so that these federal lands could just be sold without any consideration. You can buy and sell federal land now, but there has to be a reason and it has to make sense, okay? And I can go make a mining claim if I want to, do the work. Anybody can. It's still allowed. You just have to follow the rules and deal with them.
And the same with the grazing opportunity.
Well, yes, but, these ranchers, they don't own 40,000 acres. They may own a couple, 4,000 or 5,000, but they're grazing on another tens and tens of thousands that they're renting. Mm-hmm. And the price of the land sale on the House version that got eliminated thanks to a couple of stand-up House Republicans, they were just going to sell it for $1 an acre. Mm-hmm. The BLM rents grazing land to $1.25 or $1.50 per cow per season. Right. You just sell it right off. And anyway, the rules that did exist for how you sell this federal land had to do, does it make economic sense? Will it be preserved? And I just want to say, ever since our founding and the original 13 colonies, the feds have always been awarding land to the states so the states could operate their schools and whatnot to be a state
Lincoln
government.
did that with the Morrill Act.
Right.
Created.
Now I want you to look. Of all the lands from the former expansion to here, you find me a state east of the Mississippi that has more than 5 or 10% of land open for recreation for people. I mean, hunting, fishing, some camping. You come out here to the west, it averages 50% of all this land is open to hunt and fish. Why do you think people come to Idaho? The beautiful nature that you can get into. They don't come here just to sit and look at the hot, wet desert weather in the summer and the cold winters. It's the nature. But they just want to eliminate it, and they are not going to stop.
Oh, there's money to be made.
Well, yeah.
You've got Republican donors, particularly in the cattle industry and the extraction industries, who which includes lumber as well as fossil fuels, and mining. And they're looking at these public lands and going, hey, we can make money with this stuff, and we can kick that money back to Republican politicians, and those Republican politicians are thus writing the laws to facilitate it. I mean, this is Citizens United 101, Susan.
I get it. And it's not like we never had this access before. Like this rule change about building roads that have been restricted for 2 decades. Well, you know what? If you negotiate with the feds, you get what you want. Idaho and Colorado have a separate agreement with the feds where we can go into our pristine wildernesses with a plan and a reason to build roads to do what we need to do to, let our states operate. It is able to do, and they are lying through their teeth. I just want people to understand this isn't over. Please keep your ears open. And I would recommend just looking at the Wilderness Society every day. They have the best updates and what those people are up to. It's easy to see. They consolidate all the information. I'm not a advocate. I'm just saying it's a free place to go look for information because you're not going to find it in your local news. Because even on NPR, look, the parliamentarian took away this, bad 2 million acre sale. No, that one, but now here we already have another 1 million acre substitute.
Yep.
It's not going to stop as long as these people are in power. As you say, it's Citizens United. I don't know what to do with these people around here. They're all united against it, but they vote for these people. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, somebody needs to point out to them, who this is benefiting. Susan, thank you very much for the call. Great rant. It's 15 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes weekend here on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. We'll be right back. And welcome back. CJ in Shreveport, Louisiana. Hey, CJ, what's up?
Hey, I don't know how much time I got. There were actually two things that will let you pick which one. Originally, I was wanting to talk about how the Supreme Court, as currently constituted, is constitutionally illegitimate in two different ways. Or I can, based on the ruling about the LGBTQ books, read this little thing I wrote a couple of years ago that I'm kind of proud of that adapts a certain story of two gay lovers that might wind up
I'd rather
getting
didn't read anything on the air, CJ, but tell me why the Supreme Court is illegitimate.
Well, who gets to appoint, according to the Constitution, who nominates justices?
The president.
Okay, by and with the advice and consent of
the Senate.
Who to appoint, correct?
Correct.
So there's no room in there for somebody else or some organization like, say, Leader Leo and his Anti-Federalist Society.
Well, he
to
does
even
it
provide
through the
advice.
president.
To even provide advice. Actually, been
Well,
doing more than that.
There's no prohibition on somebody whispering in the president's ear. That's been going on since George Washington's time.
Well, I know, but I'm talking about actually saying, there's more to it than that because it turns out that almost all these justices and all the federal courts, not just the Supreme Court, that Leo's had a hand in, they all almost all of them just happen to be his particular religious denomination.
You mean Catholic?
Yeah, not just Christianity, but his Catholic, which is not the majority denomination in America, even for Christianity.
Yeah. Well,
so what are the odds?
A lot of people believe that's because the Catholics are more likely to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that's been the major goal of Republicans since the Reagan administration.
Perhaps, but yeah, the point though is that they applied a religious test.
Well, it
sure looks like they did.
No, I get that.
Yeah, no, it'd be difficult to prove, but I'm saying
that. No, I get your points.
Principles,
I get your point, CJ. Thank you, and thanks for making it. Stephen in Silver Springs, Florida. Hey, Stephen. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call, Tom. I'm a first-time caller, but I've been listening since probably mid-late 2000s. But I'm on a speakerphone. If you can't hear me
correctly, hear you just
let me know. Okay, thanks, Tom. Tom, my opinion of Chump, I call him Chump. He's a psychopathic antichrist, and the key word is antichrist. I looked up the definition, and it seems to apply. But I just wanted your opinion. I'm sure you talked about this before, but I just wanted your opinion.
Well, he certainly demonstrates the antithesis of the things that Jesus taught. Forgiveness, love your neighbor, welcome the stranger, feed the hungry, house the homeless, visit those in prison, surrender your wealth and serve the poor, heal the sick. I mean, these are basic tenets that you'll find in the Sermon on the Mount, most of the book of Matthew, certainly, Matthew 25, as well as the stories in Luke and Mark and John.
How about magnetic personality?
Magnetic personality?
Yeah, in other words, people are drawn to him.
To Trump? Well, he's very charming. What about that? He's a very, very competent salesman. He's the music man, only...
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom.
Yeah,
thanks, man.
Thank you, Stephen. Although at the end of the movie, the music man turned out to have a heart of gold. I don't think that's going to happen with Trump. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
Well, I woke up this morning, turned on my screen, saw Trump and Musk in a Twitter war scene. One said I bought the Senate, the other said so. I bought the man who runs your favorite show. They're punching and posting and flexing their might while the rest of us wonder who shut off the light. Democracy's wheezing in a billionaire fog just as Roberts walks his billionaire dog. Who owns America? Is it Bezos, Musk, or Vlad? Who bought the Constitution with the platinum Amex pad? It ain't we the people that ships in distress. It's a yacht club cage match in a democracy mess. Oh, say, can you see? We've been repossessed.
Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Well, I got two real quick points for you, and I'm starting to see a lot of it out online and in feeds, stuff like that. Where the heck are our Democratic leaders? I see Chris Murphy out there. I see Representative Stansbury, AOC, and Bernie, but that's about it. I would think they'd be out there screaming about what's going on, trying to stop it, but it seems to be the sense of everybody out that they're not doing anything, and we're screaming, do something, anything, to let us know you're there. They're not doing that.
Yeah,
and that is really frustrating. And if they don't start doing it, they're not going to have anybody left to support them come 26.
I agree. Ken Martin seems to think that his job as chair of the DNC is to raise money, and that's obviously and certainly a big part of it. But
I get 15 to 20 of those a day. We're asking for money, and they keep asking for money. So we're going to do this, and they don't do it.
Yeah,
they just ask for more.
I would
money
argue
so
that the leader of the DNC is the leader of the DNC. He's the head of the Democratic Party at the moment, and he should be out there making policy statements and putting together a shadow cabinet and pushing back. And I'm very disappointed that he's not. John, thank you for the call. Don in Watertown, South Dakota. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Yeah, right, Tom. Assuming the crooked Supreme Court will allow another presidential election, I think we have to elect a Democrat and pack the Supreme Court. I mean, this has gone on too long.
I'm with you.
This, of course, a wholly owned subsidiary of MAGA.
Yeah, Biden should have done it.
Yeah, he should have. But I think now, if we elect a Democrat, I think the will be there to do something about the Supreme
Yeah, it may.
Court.
I mean, had Biden tried to do it, Sinema and Manchin would have stopped him anyway. But
yeah, that's what I mean. I think now is a good time to try it. And it won't do any good to impeach the ones on there already, because Trump will just dip into the cesspool sewer and dig out some more of the same.
Yeah. Yeah, the big question is going to be the state of the economy next year, frankly. I think it was the state of the economy and COVID that took down Trump in 2020. But we have to recognize that as the racist in chief, as the guy who is most responsible for making sure that, black and brown people can't get into this country and are being evicted from this country, Donald Trump has a lot of popularity among white people in America. I mean, it's Woodrow Wilson all over again. And Wilson was a Democrat, for God's sake. But, it's here we are. So, yeah, I get it.
Why can't we just ignore the Supreme Court like Trump does?
Well, because there's other courts that will enforce their rulings. They won't enforce them against Trump, but they certainly would enforce them against you and me. Don, thanks for the call. Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Yeah, well, first I mentioned that Bill Moyers passed away, I think, yesterday.
Yeah,
and
it's a loss. He was a good man. He and I corresponded a number of times, and I spent a weekend with him at Norman Lear's house in Vermont, him and his wife, years ago. And what a remarkable man. We had quite a conversation.
Used to watch him all the time, but I can't help but think that because Article 1, Section 9 prohibits ex post facto law, that anybody who is a citizen today, born prior to this decision, that is actually a citizen, because you can't retroactively change the rules. And it's actually supposed to be Congress that is supposed to be adjusting any kind of naturalization or Article 1, Section 8. Congress is supposed to be setting the naturalization rules, not the President of the United States.
Correct.
And I would point that out.
It's going to be interesting to see if there are any states now that take Trump's executive order to heart and start refusing to issue birth certificates to children who are born of people who are not U.S. citizens. I'm guessing that there will be, and that's going to be the basis of what gets us to the Supreme Court this fall. But we'll see.
And I'd recommend for people, rather than just getting a copy of the Constitution, there's some really good issues of the Federalist Papers there. Mine actually, a Clinton Ross Tier edition that actually has the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation, in addition to annotated Federalist Papers in the original language, which is useful to read.
Yeah, they're fascinating. The other thing that's really worth reading is James Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention.
Yes, and including in James Madison, I was reading that he was he more or less kind of condemned slavery. I think it's in 20 years slavery because it's a barbarous practice.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be gone.
Yeah.
And of course,
many of the slaveholders who were in the Constitutional Convention were openly opposed to slavery. Jefferson was openly opposed to slavery for most of his life. Tried to stop it multiple times. Didn't work, but yeah. Mark, thanks for the call. Excellent points all. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Weekend here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'll be right back with your calls. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C. Markoff, with a foreword by Richard Clark. This is from the foreword. For some Americans, George W. Bush looks good by comparison to the incumbent, Donald Trump. In his post-presidency, Bush has devoted himself to worthy causes and acted in a bipartisan manner. The 43rd president should, however, be judged not by comparison to America's worst president, nor by what Bush may have done after leaving office. He should be evaluated for his actions in office, his nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. This volume from Stephen Markoff provides the evidence for such an evaluation. You can judge for yourself. For me, there is little doubt. I unfortunately witnessed Bush and his administration make many of their most cataclysmic decisions. I was in the room when some of them occurred. When in December 2000, the Supreme Court of the United States decided on a 5-4 vote that George W. Bush would become the 43rd president, I was the Special Assistant to the President for National Security and National Coordinator for Security and Counterterrorism for President William J. Clinton. I anticipated leaving the White House on January 20th, 2001, when the Clinton presidency ended. However, I was asked by the incoming administration to stay on for an unspecified period because, as it was explained to me, there was no one on Bush's incoming team who knew much about terrorism or who wanted my job. Departing Clinton administration officials stressed to the newly arriving Bush team and to Bush himself the importance and urgency of dealing with the al-Qaeda terrorist threat. Indeed, the Clinton administration had developed an extensive series of further steps to combat al-Qaeda that it would have taken had it continued in office, or indeed had Vice President Al Gore assumed office in 2001. Within days of Bush's inauguration, I asked for an urgent meeting at the cabinet level to review both the threat and the plan to ratchet up the measures against al-Qaeda. No such meeting occurred until a week before 9/11, and that meeting was inconclusive. From January 2001 through the second week in September, Bush personally received frequent intelligence warnings that al-Qaeda posed an imminent threat. He convened no meetings to address the issue. His inner circle of national security advisors did nothing, despite frequent urgings by the CIA director and the national coordinator, including such vivid imagery as our asking in writing that they consider a near future in which there would be hundreds of dead bodies in the streets of America. Instead, they focused on Iraq and the regime of Saddam Hussein. Bush's nonfeasance cost American lives. Following the deaths of over 3,000 innocent civilians on 9/11, the Bush administration attempted to tie the al-Qaeda attack to Iraq, which had nothing to do with it. Despite CIA and FBI analyses that reiterated Iraq's non-involvement, the Bush administration almost immediately followed the 9/11 attack by beginning to make plans to invade Iraq. Senior Bush officials spoke privately of the need to demonstrate our strength in the wake of the 9/11 attack, show our might by destroying the largest army in the Middle East, and thereby also prove our willingness to take U.S. military casualties to achieve our ends. Prior to 9/11, foreign terrorists who had attacked Americans had been successfully sought out throughout the world and arrested by U.S. law enforcement authorities, assisted by the intelligence community. Many terrorists had been returned to U.S. territory, given their Miranda rights, provided with counsel, tried in our civilian criminal courts, convicted, sentenced, and incarcerated in maximum security prison cells. One, tried by the Commonwealth of Virginia, was executed. Despite this record, the Bush administration abandoned criminal process and established its own extrajudicial system for dealing with terrorists post 9/11. That new system used techniques that any objective observer would judge were torture. Perhaps the most well-known technique was the procedure known as waterboarding. The United States government had tried World War II Japanese military personnel for for using the exact same technique. They were found guilty, and some were executed by hanging. The United States Senate's Committee on Intelligence conducted the most extensive oversight and investigation and examination in its history on the issue of torture during the Bush administration. That voluminous study concluded that torture was employed and that it had not, despite administration claims to the contrary, uniquely revealed information that had prevented terrorist attacks. To the contrary, it showed that tortured prisoners, unable to satisfy their interrogators with information that the terrorists did not know, instead guessed at what kind of story would stop the torture and then fabricated information of the kind they thought their prosecutors wanted to hear. Bush was not only aware of the torture, he approved it. His role in giving authorization for such acts can rightly be considered criminal malfeasance, as should his orders to invade Iraq. Among the many justifications the Bush administration considered for their invasion and occupation of Iraq, they chose finally to make the alleged weapons of mass destruction existence their chief complaint. The book, The Case Against George W. Bush by Stephen C. Markoff. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So what do we call the really, really mind-bogglingly rich? You know, at the founding of the Republic, they were referred to as speculators or moneyed interest or aristocrats. In the years leading up to the Civil War, we called them the cotton lords and the plantation aristocracy. In the late 19th century, they were the robber barons. In the 1930s, FDR called them the economic royalists. But since the Reagan Revolution, we've just called them billionaires. And now, you know, some of them want to call themselves tech bros. Like, that's kind of a good thing, you know, like tech is positive and bros, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg saying we need more masculine energy in American business culture. So we need a new phrase. I would like to suggest the morbidly rich. Morbidly suggests unhealthy. And the vast riches that some of these people have is unhealthy to our democracy, particularly since 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said that morbidly rich people can buy politicians. And it's unhealthy for them, too. So morbidly rich. There's an op-ed over at HartmannReport.com all about it. Check it out.
He said just day one, but we knew the score. Now he's sending troops to settle old score. Play streets to the Capitol's dome. He's making this land feel less like home. He's a dictator with a MAGA crown, turning our freedoms upside down. Laughs off the laws, says it's just a game, but democracy's torch is losing its flame.
Back 36 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Chris in Dallas. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
How you doing today? I want to ask, with today's decision of birthright citizenship and more foundational Black Americans agreeing with Trump policies, how do you think the Democratic Party will cover and galvanize Black Americans to vote again when the political views don't align with Black American values, especially with more of them moving away from the people of color coalition and the minority coalition facade?
I haven't seen the Democratic Party moving away from black people. What are you talking about, Chris?
No, I'm saying black people moving away from the Democratic Party.
Why do you think that's happening?
Because I really feel like the people of color and the minority coalition has negatively affect Black Americans, and that's why you see more Black Americans kind of like owning up to their Americanness and separating themselves from immigrants of color lately.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, black people are not immune from racism and misogyny, and so there are some black people who are going to be, You know, I mean, you got Kanye out there talking, you know, doing his Heil Hitler. So there are some black people who hate brown people or who hate women or who hate Jews, and they're going to move to the Republican Party. I don't see why anybody else who's black would, but I don't see why anybody else who's white would either, frankly, other than being rich. What am I missing?
I think it's more of like the benign neglect since the late 60s have like impacted more black people, and then like lumping black Americans up with like people of color like it's one big group. And
well, what would the opposite of benign neglect look like?
I mean, honestly, like I'm from Texas, and like I'm a descendant of slaves, and how I look at it, more black people are understanding like you can't get rid of racism. So we mostly are getting to the point where you can go somewhere where racism you can deal with, because you can't force somebody or deal with you. So you might as well deal with like-minded people, or
you can use the law.
Yes, but not necessarily always in black people favor, because you know we people pay our politicians, people pay our judges.
Sure.
And just
and they're screwing white people too. But I get your point.
Yeah, I understand that, but you know, when it comes down to how like black people think, like kind of how most people lump all black people the same. That's kind of how like black people look at the system in just white people, period.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's more people starting to understand the values of the Reconstruction period of the separate but equal, and I understand why a lot of black people are supporting the birthright citizenship decision, because when you kind of look at it, it does supposed to apply to just descendants of slaves, and then you have to be nationalized if you're not a descendant of slaves. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you just don't want more brown people becoming citizens?
I don't care if they become citizens or not. I just feel like the way they path through citizenship shouldn't be used through the way black Americans receive citizenship.
I get it. I'm not a big fan of birthright tourism, for example. You know, people coming to the United States just to drop a baby. And I think there should be reasonable limits on it, but that's not what the Constitution says. So, anyhow, Chris, thank you for sharing your opinions. I'm appreciative of it. Thank you. Abby in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hey, Abby, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you doing? I want to flag Robert Reich's Substack article this morning about how people, or what he calls centrist Democrats, what I would like to call Wall Street Democrats, are clutching their pearls in agony as if it's the end of the world that an actual progressive is going to occupy the Democratic Party line for mayor in this next election. And I want to remind, what's that?
In New York City, yeah.
Yeah. I want to remind Wall Street Democrats of how they treated progressives in every election of my adult life. I mean, I've been a progressive, backing progressives from Dennis Kucinich to Bernie Sanders, and every time a Wall Street Democrat wins the nomination, they tell us that we have to now all get in line and stand up and salute to this Wall Street Democrat because they're better than the Wall Street Republican that's running against. Now, here they are threatening to back Adams or Cuomo on a third-party line and just acting in any way from just ignoring the election altogether out to outright sabotage. It's time for them to obey the same words that they told to us. It's time to get in line, stand up, and back the Democrat that's on the ballot, rather than just whine and complain about, oh, my God, it's a progressive. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I'm pretty upset by the way these people are acting.
Yeah, well, you know, they're protecting their income, basically. I mean, the people you're calling the Wall Street Democrats, I call them the problem solver Democrats, or the on the take Democrats, or the corporate Democrats. You know, they're making serious money and have huge employment opportunities after they leave Congress if they do a lot of favors.
And then when they get elected, they don't do anything. They don't do anything.
Elected
them.
They do a lot for the bankers and for the insurance companies and all that sort of thing. No, I agree with you.
And then they expect us progressives to get excited about them. We're all the excited on the progressive wing of the party.
I agree. Avi, well said. Thank you very much. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Say, I maybe folks would like to watch this weekend.
You're fading out, Diane. Can you get your mouth closer to the mic? I can't hear you. BADFAITH. And it's a movie about, it's a feature-length documentary that explores the dangerous rise of Christian nationalism in the United States. It's part archival chronicled, meaning, film from the past, original film, and part expose. And the film reveals the secretive political machinery that is relentlessly sought to weaken and destroy American democracy in order to promote an authoritarian, I would almost say a theocracy vision. And you can see it on Tubi for free, Peacock, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and even on YouTube. So everyone has an opportunity to tap into this. And it's got the GOP, Christian white nationalists, evangelical churches. Right.
Project 2025 is part of this. Yes?
Diane, you had faded out there in the beginning. Could you tell us the name of the movie again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can.
How's this?
What's the name of the movie?
Can you hear me? Bad Faith. BAD.
Okay.
FAITH. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it 100%, and it's all about the Christian white nationalism.
I'm familiar with it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a good one.
People should watch it this weekend for the 4th of July.
There you go.
It's eye-opening.
Okay. Diane, thank you very much. Great talking with you. It's 44 minutes past the hour. That's right, the 4th of July is coming up. Holy cow. It's 44 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where despair is not an option. Stay with us. And welcome back, Joe in Seattle. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Oh, thank you for taking my call. Hey, one time I asked a professor who has the most power in Washington, D.C., and he pointed out to me that most Americans don't realize that it's actually the Supreme Court justices.
Well, in theory, and they surrendered a lot of that power today.
Right, exactly. And when I look up the facts here, it's pretty daunting. After being seated on the Supreme Court bench, justices may serve for life or retire as they wish. They may impeach improper behavior, but only 2 have been impeached, and only one of these was removed from office. The average length of a court is 16 years. 49 of them had died on the seats, and 56 of them have retired.
Right.
I think, in my personal opinion, it's time to change the whole Supreme Court terms.
I agree. I think they should be 16-year terms, and they should be term limited. And when those 16 years are out, the justices have the choice of retiring or being kicked back down to a circuit court bench, because they are granted lifetime judgeships. But that's an easy way around it. And I think that the size of the court should be expanded to 13 as well.
Right. I mean, it was established in 1789.
When the population of the United States was just a couple million people.
Exactly. So, I mean, if people would stop and think, hey, the president, the vice president, they come and go.
Yeah.
But when you have the Supreme Justices set
the idea was to give them stability and independence, but that's not what's happened. I mean, you know, this effort by Leonard Leo and these other billionaires to control the court has been very, very successful, and I think it demands some response. Joe, spot on. Thank you. Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Fine. What's on your mind?
Well, regarding the Supreme Court, these judges are hacks. They are not judges. And we need to stop calling the Republican Party a Republican Party. We need to just use the term fascist. They're fascists. This fascist party, they are unafraid of any consequences. They don't attend town hall meetings. They don't face their constituents. And I think the reason why they're so unafraid of doing what they're doing, including passing this horrendous tax break for billionaires bill, is because I'm afraid. Look what the Supreme Court just did yesterday.
Yeah.
Giving him more power. And I'm afraid that he's going to suspend the Constitution and we will have no elections. And the Supreme Court will go along with this. What are your thoughts on that?
I share your fear, Alfredo. I think that's why I've said this many times. I think has not yet invoked the Insurrection Act as he's holding it in abeyance for the 2026 elections. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for everything you do, Tom. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Alfredo. Thanks for the calls. It's always nice hearing from you. It's 48 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash, because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out. Get up your calls here. Lee in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Hey, Lee, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. I got a couple of quick questions, and I very much appreciate your unvarnished opinion. My first question is this. Do you think that the recent decisions made by the Senate parliamentarian are going to stand, or is the Republican Party in the Senate just going to ignore it and violate Senate rules? And my second question is, and you touched on this very briefly with the previous caller, in 2026 and 2028, do you think we're even going to have elections, or is Trump going to try to find some excuse to declare martial law, postpone or invalidate the elections, or just have so much massive voter suppression that if we do have elections in 2026 and 2028, will the will of the people, even be heard?
Well, the will of the people wasn't heard in 2024. Over 4 million people were prevented from voting, or their votes weren't counted, as Greg Palast documents, and that's what put Trump in the White House. But and I expect a whole hell of a lot more of that in the next 3 years over the 26, 28 elections. Whether there will even be elections or not, I'd say probably the odds are 80, 90% that there will be. The odds that they'll be rigged, at least in the red states, 90, 100%. But like I said earlier, I think that one of the reasons Trump hasn't declared a state of emergency under the Insurrection Act is because he's waiting for the elections to do that. But we'll see. With regard to respecting the wishes of the parliamentarian, when Democrats were in control of the House and Senate, and Joe Biden wanted his debt relief, in a reconciliation bill. This was debt relief for student borrowers. The Senate parliamentarians stripped it out. And on this program, I yelled and screamed about it and said, that Schumer should ignore her and fire her. And I really went off on it. It's the same parliamentarian. It's the same person. And she's telling the Republicans they can't do it. And Schumer ignored me and respected her opinion, which is probably the right thing to do. Whether John Thune, who's the Senate Republican leader now, he's taken over from Mitch McConnell, and he'll be the decider on this, basically. Whether he's going to respect her wishes or not is unknown at this moment, but my guess is that he will, and that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Thune stated that he was going to honor what the Senate parliamentarian, decided, but I'm just worried whether or not that's going to stand. If he's going to be, I think he will. Pressured.
I think he will. It's going to. There's going to be.
I hope so.
Just like when the parliamentarians screwed the Democrats, and there was lots of sturm and drang on the left, including myself. I think you'll have, lots of ranting and raving on the right and on Fox News and whatnot. But I suspect it'll hold. Lee, thank you for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi. I'm surprised that there hasn't been more said about the fact that there was no nuclear radiation after this bombing anywhere. Mm-hmm. And the UN's people couldn't find trees. There wasn't a raised level. The only level that was raised was when the Israelis were bombing the nuclear sites in Iran.
Yeah.
So
you're right, and there were also trucks that were removing canisters from that area in the days before the bombing. Trump kind of telegraphed the bombing, and the uranium apparently is held in canisters about the size of a scuba tank, so it's quite portable. Uh-huh. And we're only talking about 800 kilograms of the stuff, a little over 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds. So I'm guessing that they got it all out of there. And
right. Well, one of the things that Trump said is it's so heavy you can't move it. I don't think he was aware of forklifts at the time. But,
and that if it's in, uranium is heavy. It's one of the heaviest elements.
Yeah.
It's about 4 times as heavy as iron. But at least based on its atomic number, But if that's the case, that doesn't mean that, that would mean that a cylinder, a scuba tank size cylinder of uranium, if it was steel, it would probably weigh 100, 200 pounds. If it's uranium, it probably weighs 400 or 500 pounds. But you're right. They have invented these things called forklifts. And you could also, if old fashioned, you can just get 4 or 5 guys going heave-ho.
Right. I do know a 3-inch sphere of highly activated Ukrainian. Anyway, is about 14 pounds. A 3-inch ball of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Material.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the size they usually have to bring, maybe a little bit bigger to be put into a bomb.
Right.
And
but this is one of the questions that people on both the left and the right are asking is, if you blew up that site, where did the radiation go? One theory is that everything just collapsed in on top of it, and that's the theory that the Trump folks are promoting. They may be right. The assertions on either side are just speculation right now.
Right. What would Iran do with a nuclear bomb anyway? They're going to bomb Israel. They're going to bomb Jerusalem.
They're going to do the same thing North Korea and everybody else is doing with nuclear bombs. They're going to say, you hit me, I'll hit you back.
That's why they got it. That's because they were the
mutually assured destruction.
Of evil.
Yeah, it's deterrence.
Right.
I'm with you. Bill, good to hear from you. Thank you so much for the call. We'll be back on the other side of the break with more of your calls and more of the news of the day. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. speaking the truths the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. Anderson Cooper is smacking down Pete Hegseth. This is fascinating. Hegseth went in, held his press conference yesterday morning and looked right at the press and said, "You guys want Trump to fail, and so you pick on every little, and just went on." I played a clip of it for you yesterday afternoon. It's so offensive, I'm not going to repeat it. So Anderson Cooper just is pushing back. He says a number of the claims he made about the reporting were not accurate. We put together what the Secretary of Defense had to say this morning and what we actually reported about that early Defense Intelligence Agency assessment. And then basically he took Hegseth's claims about how the media covered the story. Hegseth was claiming, for example, that they weren't talking about their successes. And Cooper plays a clip of them talking about their successes. And Hegseth, it basically just takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's all the lies that Pete Hegseth told. I think he's drinking again. But, I don't know, but I've known a lot of alcoholics in my life, and it's damn hard to quit that drug. It's extremely hard to quit that drug. I know alcoholics who literally cannot go an entire week without a drink. And I'm guessing Pete Hegseth is one of them. Although, he never really was the brightest bulb on the tree. So, anyway. Meanwhile, the worst year in decades for the housing market. Yesterday, I mentioned, how Ronald Reagan sent over 1,000 bankers to prison, or prosecuted over 1,000. I don't recall how many went to prison, but it was quite a few. Around the savings and loan scandal. You'll recall that in the 80s. When the S&L industry almost died. It had to be bailed out by the federal government. Bill Seidman was put in charge of that, an economist and former university president out of Grand Rapids. We used to play, this was back well over a decade ago, I used to play long, extensive clips of Seidman explaining how the whole crash happened in 2008 and how Bush screwed it up. And actually back in the 80s, how it happened during Reagan and how Reagan fixed it. Seidman was in charge of the Resolution Trust Corporation, the RTC, which was the organization that basically took over on behalf of the government, took over the S&Ls and then brought them back and reprivatized them and all that sort of thing. Well, we're seem to be drifting into that kind of territory. Home sales fell 0.7% in May. With April posting the slowest pace since 2009. A slower housing market could affect the entire economy. Why? Because when you buy a new house, typically people spend tens of thousands of dollars in the first year after they bought a new house in fixing it up. Hey, it needs a new roof. Hey, let's repaint the thing. Let's remodel the living room. Let's get some new furniture, all those kind of things. Housing represents 18% of GDP. And so if housing is slowing down, GDP will slow down. And this has a ripple effect right across the board. On top of this, this is an interesting statistic. 60% of existing homes are owned by people over the age of 60. Why is that? Because when I was young, when I was in my 20s, Louise and I bought our first house when we were in our 20s. And you could do it back then because, number one, nobody had student debt. Reagan hadn't yet destroyed our college system. And number two, healthcare was inexpensive. We lived in Michigan where both the hospitals and the insurance companies were required by law to be nonprofits. It was very inexpensive. And number three, the average cost of housing was only 2, 3, maybe 4 times at the most what the annual income is. And today it's about 10 times what your annual income is. And the reason for that, of course, is because you've got literally millions of homes being bought every year and tens of millions of homes owned all across the United States by big investment companies and foreign investors. And this is, making housing less available and thus driving up the price of it. So keep an eye on this. I think Trump is going to be bringing us, or at least during the Trump administration, some of it is the direct result of Trump's actions, his tariffs, his tax cuts, things like that. But I think that we're going to see a severe recession coming. And, hang on to your hat. Meanwhile, the world's richest 1%, according to a new report from Oxfam, increased their wealth by $33.9 trillion in the last 10 years. $33 trillion. Now, we knew that the richest people in America had increased their wealth by $50 trillion from the time Reagan came into office until around 2010, and that the wealth of the middle class had decreased by about $50 trillion. Now, I haven't seen any numbers on whether this additional $33 trillion since 2015 is matched by a loss of $33 trillion among the middle class. I'm guessing a good chunk of it is. So the Oxfam briefing says this immense concentration of wealth has translated to political power in a movement toward oligarchy that sees ultra-wealthy individuals able to share political and economic decision-making in ways that then increase their own wealth. Bernie Sanders has come out and said billionaires should not even exist. Joe Biden, remember the speech he gave warning about oligarchy? People have forgotten that, but it was solid. And then you've got, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez basically renting Venice for a wedding. The people put a sign in St. Mark's Square that said, if you can rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more taxes. The $33.9 trillion, by the way, that the top 1% increased their wealth by since 2015 is enough to eliminate annual poverty 22 times over, according to the World Bank. 22 times over. That's mind-boggling. All right, that's it for me. What's on your mind today? It's Anything Goes weekend here. Chuck in Mount Prospect, Illinois. Hey, Chuck, what's up?
Hi, Tom. 2 quick things, and I'll let you respond to both of them. I feel that the Democratic Party and the media are being negligent by not even asking the question, who are these ICE agents? We're on the verge of a police state. Nobody's even bothering to find out who they are.
I agree.
Are they Proud Boys? Are they ex-January 6 people? Are they Trump's personal militia? But nobody's even asking the question. So what can we do to get the answer to that? And I know this will be controversial, but if they won't identify themselves, the local police should arrest them.
Yeah. Well, right now, the local police in most jurisdictions don't have laws that would allow them to arrest them. Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in California are trying to pass a law that requires all law enforcement agencies to show their faces and their badge numbers and their names, which is only reasonable. I mean, they're public servants. Yeah. They work for us. They should be accountable to us.
I want the media or the Democrats to even ask this question of who are these people. I think people with right leanings might be a little concerned about this.
Yeah, historically, actually, it's been the right that's most terrified of, the thought police are coming, right?
Right. The NRA forgot to rise up, by the way. Have you seen that meme?
Exactly, yeah.
It's Wayne LaPierre with a gun says, we accidentally forgot to rise up against a tyrannical government.
There you go. Yeah, nothing accidental about it, we all know. No, I have seen Democratic politicians and media figures asking that question, Chuck, but I agree with you, it's nowhere near loud enough, and it should be something that people like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are demanding every single day, and tragically they're not. Chuck, thank you for the call.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Today's Supreme Court decision, a reminder of how much damage the court has done in the past with things like Dred Scott and Citizens United. And welcome back. Happy Fria's Day, Kino.
Yes, happy Frias Day. I'm back on schedule. Last week I talked to you on Thor's Day, you know.
I do. I recall.
Okay, today, Tom, in sociology, there's this concept of groupthink.
Mm-hmm.
When a leader, when the people that work for a leader only give the information that he wants to hear, then that becomes a very dangerous situation because if the leader is not able to make good decisions, if there's a suspension of analytical and critical thinking. Right. And this is coming about like Hegseth criticizing the press for trying to present factual information. We're headed into this group think, and I would invite the Democratic Party and I would invite you to talk more about group think, the dangers of group think that are taking over this country. Why do you think that concept may not be understood by the public very well, but it's a fact of sociology, and time after time when a leader doesn't want to hear all the true facts, even bad information, it leads to bad decisions. So why do you think there's not a discussion, and should there be more of a discussion, and would you consider talking more about groupthink?
Yeah. I think your point is really well made, Kino, and what I would add to it is that failure or unwillingness or fear, actually, I think is the motivating factor of presenting distinctive, contradistinct, contrary information, to people, is also a characteristic of dictatorships, and it represents one of the great weaknesses of dictatorships. For example, Hitler was unwilling to listen to his generals when he decided to invade Russia in the winter of 44, 43, I forget the year. And that was the decision that caused Germany to lose the war more than any other single decision. And his generals were strongly opposed to it because they knew winter was coming. They knew how hard the terrain was going to be. They knew how thinly they were stretched. But Hitler, thought he could. He was the great military tactician. This is always a danger when you've got a government where everybody does what dear leader says. Democracy is not just the most resilient form of government, it's also typically the form of government that produces the best outcomes, because the larger the group of people who are offering opinions, the more likely you are to have a rational opinion that's somewhere kind of in the middle of all the spectrum of thought. And,
now, the Supreme Court decisions cut back the power of judges to disagree, and this is a groupthink being promoted and exaggerated and magnified, and so I'd like to invite the Democratic Party and you to talk more about this danger, if possible.
Yeah, well, I get it. I completely agree with you, Kino, and I would take it the next step further. I think it's more than just groupthink. Groupthink assumes, that you've got a group that is largely thinking the same way, and so they're. But this is fear of opposition, fear of truth, fear of saying anything that might contradict or offend dear leader, and that's even more dangerous than groupthink, because that's an intentional withholding of contrary information. Kino, thank you. Yeah, I'll take your advice to heart. I appreciate the call, and happy Frias Day to you. It's 19 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a second. So stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing that black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. This is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s And actually, as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. It was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. And this is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article at .com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out.
They told us to work, to dream, to strive, but stole the future while we were alive. We borrowed hope just to get through school. Now we drown in debt. They call that the rule. They took our health and sold it for gold, turned healing and learning into things bought and sold. Now we break beneath what we can't afford, while billionaires laugh behind every door. It's time to rise, time to see reparations for a rigged economy.
Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Deborah in Chicago. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for accepting my call. In fact, I was listening also to free speech, but I had an opportunity to hear. I didn't hear you yesterday during your regular, but the re-airing I heard, and in fact, there was a Jerry, and there was also another gentleman. Jerry was talking about gentrification, and the other, but both of them have to do with, for me, and I don't know if they brought this up, about the young man that was nominated for mayoral in New York. And
right.
What he's saying in terms of helping people, that is helping really the masses of the people. And to me, that takes me back a South Side of my life born here. And thinking about the South and the West Side, where were you rhetorically when Dr. King came to Chicago, lived on the West Side? I'm sure that he wouldn't have been able to do so on the South Side, but the conditions were just as bad and appalling. But Mahalia Jackson, they were championing for quality of life for Black people. Would have wanted for all people, and even Mayor Harold Washington. But it was the dailies and even the Voms. And I've spoken with you about this. And coincidentally, here in Chicago, Laquan McDonald, his cousin, was shot just today, a little while ago. You know, bringing up Rahm, and for me, since the 90s, 91, I came out speaking about what was happening in housing. I had no idea he was involved in any of this. And with Trump, with Benjamin Netanyahu, all of that land grab. 72, where were you in 72? A teacher said about housing, Chicago housing, mass numbers, hundreds of thousands of people, Black people, political might, that when they tear that down, there will be rich white developers that will grab that land. It's been vacant, but that's what's happening in Gaza. Is what's going to happen in Iran. And Trump is a realtor, right? Property. So what Dr. King was asking for, we never got. Instead, we got drugs and guns dropped in our area. Gaza has bombs. And nobody, and this is kind of off the subject, Tom, but what happened? Nobody talks about those 100+ journalists that Benjamin Netanyahu had assassinated. I'm going to say assassinated. You can't get the truth if you silence, and that's what's been happening in Chicago. Those who try to bring up a quality of life for Black people in Chicago, South and West Side, they have been silenced out. Yeah. So in Chicago, please, Tom, for democracy's sake, you have got to look at what's happening and has happened in Chicago.
Okay. I will do so, Deborah. Thank you very much for the call.
Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah,
and have a safe holiday. And I love the music. Thank you, Miss Louise.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, my dad grew up on the south side of Chicago. Back in the 20s and 30s, and when it was mostly a poor white ghetto. And Louise and I used to go to Chicago every Christmas and visit our friend Fred Derby, who lived there, and he was the designer for Marshall Fields, and we just do all our Christmas shopping there.
Spirit back here with the truth.
Yeah, we know Chicago really well. Deborah, thank you for the call. I wish you well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anita in Ludington, Michigan. Hey, Anita, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good Friday.
Yeah.
I'm calling about, are you familiar with of the Geo prison that opened in Baldwin, Michigan, up in Lake County?
I am not.
That's like the largest Midwest detainment center.
No, I don't know anything about it.
Oh, okay. It's a prison. I mean, they call it detainment center or facility to try to sound better, but it holds 1,800 people.
Wow.
And it's like 30 miles east of Ludington.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's out in the Manistee National Forest, basically, is all around it. This county is the poorest county in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And this facility has been opened and closed by Geo several times because of different infractions and problems.
Mm-hmm.
They had a big hunger strike the last time they were open because they were serving spoiled food.
Right. So what's the point you're making, Anita, or did you just want to tell me about it?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have been protesting the center because it is, the Geos, they figured that they will make $70 million on this center the first year from housing immigrants, and that they look at it as a growth potential for
turning brown people into profit.
Yep, and worse yet, in Lake County, poorest county in Michigan, they are fighting their tax assessment that they don't want to pay their local taxes.
The prison? Wow, that's incredible.
The prison is.
That's incredible. Anita, I got to run, but thanks for the information. I always appreciate a report from my home state. I appreciate it. Ludington, beautiful area, by the way. 27 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes weekend. I'll be picking up more of your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with you, folks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is the second, Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America by Carol Anderson. This is from the introduction. It was like a snuff film, that July 6th, 2016 live stream. Philando Castile sat in his car, buckled in, bleeding, dying. "Why did you shoot him, sir?" asked his fiancée, Diamond Reynolds, pain piercing her every word. Castile, who had been pulled over in a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota, because his, quote, wide-set nose, end quote, supposedly resembled that of a robbery suspect, had been reaching for his ID, but in order to avoid any surprises, let the police officer know he had a gun with him, a legally permitted, right-to-carry concealed gun. That was all the cop needed to know. Officer Geronimo Yanez began shooting. Castile's death came just one day after Alton Sterling's down in Louisiana. He, too, was carrying a gun, which was not unusual in this right-to-carry state. Granted, Sterling had a felony conviction, so owning a firearm was, for him, illegal, but he had been robbed before and wanted protection. On July 5th, 2016, the Baton Rouge police received a 911 call that there was a man with a weapon threatening customers at a local convenience store. As officers rolled onto the scene, they saw Sterling sitting there, selling CDs and DVDs, just as the store owner allowed him to do and indeed welcomed. The threatening man was not Sterling. In fact, there was no threatening man. It had been a prank call, but that didn't matter. Within a few minutes, police had thrown the black man down, pinned him to the asphalt, and then started yelling that Sterling had a gun. He did. It was in his pocket where he could hardly reach it, what with the officers squatting on both his legs and one arm. Nevertheless, the police began firing round after round into his prone body, point blank. Blood poured out of his chest, but not for long. Alton Sterling was dead. The back-to-back deaths of these two black men police had shot for carrying guns should have jolted into action the Second Amendment's staunchest advocate, the National Rifle Association.
In 1995, for example, the organization's denunciations flew fast and furious when it contended that law enforcement not only overreacted, but went out of its way to kill gun owners. Angered by the deaths at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, and the siege and firefight at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, both of which were sparked by federal agents serving warrants for weapons violations, Wayne LaPierre, the NRA's executive vice president, angrily wrote, quote, "If you have a badge, you have the government's go-ahead to harass, intimidate, and even murder law-abiding citizens," end quote. He further denounced cops as, quote, "jackbooted government thugs who have more power to take away our constitutional rights, break in our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure or kill us." Nearly 2 decades later, that sentiment had not changed. This was evident when Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy, who had refused to pay over $1 million in fees for grazing his cattle on public land, summoned his gun-toting, self-styled militiamen to do battle with federal authorities to prevent the seizure of his herd for restitution. Richard Mack, a former recipient of the NRA Law Enforcement Officer of the Year Award, asserted, "If federal agents are going to start killing people, I'm sorry, but to show the world how ruthless these people are, women and children need to be placed in the front lines as human shields." Mack didn't flinch as he insisted, quote, "Women need to be the first ones shot. I would have put my own wife or daughter there on the front lines, and I would have been a screaming bloody murder to watch them die," end quote. Larry Pratt, a speaker at the NRA's 2014 National Convention, commenting on the fact that Bundy, quote, "backed them," the Bureau of Land Management agents, down with automatic rifles and other deadly weaponry, proudly called that armed confrontation, quote, "a proper, legitimate, lawful response to illegitimate, unlawful exercise of government power, particularly on the federal level," end quote. Yet how quickly the NRA's swagger disappeared when government agents gunned down Philando Castile and Alton Sterling for merely carrying guns. Sterling's death didn't even merit acknowledgement. As for Castile, the NRA broke its silence only after inordinate pressure from African-American members led the gun manufacturers' lobby to issue a tepid statement that the Second Amendment was applicable, quote, "regardless of race, religion, or sexual orientation." When pressed further by many of its members to stand up for Castile, the often fierce organization demurred, saying it was, quote, "important for the NRA not to comment while the investigation is ongoing." This situational silence did not go unnoticed. The NRA had not only loudly defended the rights of those at the Branch Davidian cult and at Ruby Ridge, men who had actually shot and killed members of law enforcement, but the organization had also doubled down on calling for more guns in the face of mass shootings in a public school in Newtown, Connecticut, and a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Yet here, the guardian of the Second Amendment was now deliberately ignoring the inconvenient fact that black men had been killed for merely possessing a firearm. "Where's the NRA?" asked journalist Hannah Kozlowska. "Didn't Sterling and Philando Castile have Second Amendment rights too?" David Graham in The Atlantic coolly observed that, quote, "two shootings give a strong sense that the Second Amendment does not apply to black Americans the same way it does to white Americans," end quote. Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson wrote that he saw the old Jim Crow whites only sign plastered above the Second Amendment. The book, The Second, by Carol Anderson.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
Oh, Canada, you packed your snow and pride. Said no thanks, Donald, we won't let you inside. We used to share maple and trust across the line. Now you're eyeing us like Alaska in '59. Mark Carney stepped up with a banker's grin. No trade deals with fascists, we won't let you win. He warned the crowd with a voice so clear. America wants our forests, our water, our beer. Whoa, Canada, our friends so true. We used to play fair, now we're ghosting you. You sent us syrup licentious smock, but Trump came along and fed you to the fog. Now you're locking your borders and shutting your gate. Guess being neighbors ain't the same when your buddy's full of hate in your...
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. John in Westchester, New York. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom, happy Friday. Hey, I think you made Trump's list with that song. You know, I don't. You weren't on it before. You're definitely on it now.
Probably.
The Supreme Court this morning kind of deferred it to Congress. Now that's legislation, right? I mean, couldn't we do like maybe a Project 2026 with legislation and the midterm elections?
Well, we don't have the ability to pass anything through Congress right now. The Republicans control both houses.
Yes. Well, when the next time they go for election is when?
Well, you're going to have your midterms in November of next year.
2026.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm saying. So that's our Project 2026.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
A living document, an actual living document.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd love to see it. I've been arguing for a long, long time that the DNC should set up a shadow cabinet. We should have a shadow president. We should have a shadow vice president. We should have a shadow secretary of state and secretary of the treasury. And these people should be regularly holding press conferences to say what they would do if Democrats were in control. And they should be writing it down, like you said, with the Project 2026. Spot on, John. Brilliant.
Well, they're telling us it's legislation they want. That's the only thing that's going to change it. So that's what we should fight for. That should be the 2026. That should be.
Yep. Legislation has the primacy.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah. Thank you. You too, John. Mike in Coos Bay, Oregon. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Long time fan, of course, coming to the end of the show here. But I do have an issue. Since 2016, the far left has tossed so much, excuse the terminology, so much shade at the Democratic Party as a whole that I'm having a lot of difficulty. I'm having a lot of difficulty with that, with being told that the centrists need to vote in lockstep with the Mamdani win. And it was an impressive win, and I hope he does win. But with how much crap was thrown at Hillary and Biden in the primaries and after Biden won and through the general election, I'm having a lot of difficulty reconciling the messages that we're getting around Mamdani.
I would argue it was the exact opposite, Mike. Bernie came out and was calling for, universal health care, which every other democracy in the world has, and Clinton ridiculed him for it and threw crap at him. He called for universal free college, which every other democracy in the world has except us, and Clinton ridiculed him and trashed him for it. He called for a higher minimum wage, a $15 minimum wage, which we have here in Portland. Seattle's got a $20 minimum wage, and it increased the economic vibrancy. Clinton and the corporate Democrats said, "Oh, you can't do that. The fat cats who pay our way will be all upset." Jeff Bezos doesn't want to pay his workers more. Mamdani is not saying pretty much anything other than what Bernie has been saying all along. And I think, if the Clinton machine and the Democratic Party hadn't basically destroyed Bernie's chances in 2016, he would have easily beaten Donald Trump. We've been in a populist moment since at least 2008, where the American people want somebody who is not controlled by billionaires and big corporations. And frankly, both parties have been giving us nothing but that.
And I do actually have one thing that I'm going to say that's going to not be very popular, and I'm going to be frank about that. I voted Democratic virtually all my life since I was able to vote Democratic. But while I agree with Bernie's message, as far as people whose primary message is the destruction of a wide-ranging Democratic Party, Bernie's camp has produced a few very powerful.
I don't know anybody whose message is to destroy the Democratic Party. I'm just everybody that I'm hearing from is just calling for the Democratic Party to back away from Clintonism, to go back to where it was with under Jimmy Carter and Lyndon Johnson and Franklin Roosevelt. Be the advocate for the average working person rather than for the fat cats in Wall Street and the bankers.
Would you call this a fair statement where Biden was as close to that as we've gotten up to this point, even with his communication issues?
Yeah, Biden was damn close to Bernie. I mean, Biden asked Bernie to write his major piece of legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden was our first progressive president since Lyndon Johnson.
And yet the far left, and I want to say that in quotes because I agree with a lot of what they say. I don't agree with a lot of how they look, of how the quote-unquote far left, because I agree with a lot of it, but I vote centrist when it comes to national politics, and I'm going to be frank about that.
I don't know what centrist means. It means you're opposed to everybody being able to go to college for free?
Absolutely not.
Okay, does it mean you're opposed to everybody having free health care or inexpensive health care like they do in Canada?
Well, wouldn't you call, to a certain extent, wouldn't you call anybody who would win a presidential election centrist?
No. Donald Trump is not a centrist.
Well, to oppose the current Republican Party, how would you balance further left policies out?
I would go with what the people of America want. When you do the polling, you find that more than 70% of Americans think everybody should be able to have a union job. The centrist Democrats oppose that. The more than 70% of Americans think everybody should be able to have inexpensive health care, like every other developed country in the world. Centrist Democrats oppose that. They want a corporate program like Obamacare, where we're paying an average of $13,000 per person per year in the United States, and in Canada they pay $6,000. In France they pay $5,500, and they get better results, and people live longer.
Keep in mind, sorry for stepping in. Keep in mind, I don't consider myself the problem solver Democrats.
I get all that, but when I hear people describing centrist Democrats, either they're talking about these issues, these economic issues, or they're basically saying, that they don't think the Democrats should defend the rights of the queer community and black people because it's unpopular with a lot of white racists. And I get that if you want to win elections, but I think I think that when you sell your soul, when you sacrifice your principles to win elections, you're not doing yourself or your country any kind of favors.
Can I throw one more statement out?
Well, you still haven't told me what position makes somebody a centrist. What is it that what is the position that Mondani is taking that is not within the mainstream of the Democratic Party and doesn't poll better than 60 or 70% among the people as a whole? Name one policy.
From some of the things that I've read up to this point, and you know where I'm calling from, so I'm not a New York voter, but some of the things that I have read trying to educate myself.
I'm not talking about generalizations. Give me a specific.
Isn't there a policy that he has proposed for a government-run grocery store in New York?
In food deserts, in those areas of New York City where you cannot walk to a store and buy fresh fruit and vegetables, he is proposing that the city open those stores. Yeah, absolutely. What's wrong with that?
Well, I used to live in the city center of Pittsburgh, where there was also a food desert there. Mm-hmm. So I've personally been in situations like that. But if policies in that context were to try to go national, that's where I think that would be. That's where I think there's a weakness there with that. It's going to work in New York.
Food is pretty
because
essential stuff.
Of the wealth of New York.
You can't live without food, and living on the kind of food that you can only get in food deserts. So the only kind of food you can get in food deserts, ding dongs and Twinkies and potato chips and anything that's packaged and will last on a shelf for more than a year, is a sure route to obesity and heart disease, which then costs society a fortune. I mean, there's nothing centrist about having food deserts that cause people to cost us all, a small fortune in healthcare costs.
Looking back on Kamala's campaign, would have considered her centrist or more further left?
She campaigned generally as a progressive. I think the big mistake, the centrist mistake that she made was inviting Liz Cheney and inviting billionaires like Mark Cuban to campaign with her. But no, by and large, she was taking progressive positions. And I think that if Democrats want to win elections, they need to take centrist positions.
I hear the music, and I just want to let you know I was 100% behind her, just for additional context. But thanks, Tom.
No, I get it. Yeah, I'm not trying to debate you, Mike. I was trying to understand, what does centrist mean? I still never got a clear answer, but, we'll have to have another conversation in the future. Mike, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I am, just for the record, I am always happy to be challenged, to debate, to discuss, to disagree. I mean, that's no problem. Go for it. And welcome back, Jeff in Irvine, California. Hey, Jeff, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Well, I was going to call to talk about the Supreme Court, but after the conversation you just had, kind of fits right in, because I blame Democrats for a lot of what's going on now. And it's because Democrats who refused to vote for Al Gore in 2000, because he wasn't as liberal as Nader, and who refused to vote for Hillary in 2016 for the reasons you guys just discussed, are why we are where we are today. I mean, I've always begged all my friends, look, support whichever Democrat you want in the primaries. But once it's general election time, the prime directive is keep Republicans out of the White House.
Yeah, I agree. Although, for the record, in 2000, in the months before the 2000 election in Florida, Jeb Bush had his Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, pull a list of felons in Florida and purge anybody from the voting rolls in Florida whose first and last names were the same, even if the middle name and the date of birth did not match. And the result of that was, because most of the felons in Texas are Hispanic or black, the result of that was that roughly 70,000, some people say it's as high as 90,000, but certainly at least 60 to 70,000 African Americans and Hispanics were knocked off the voting rolls in Florida. And that's why George Bush was able to win that state by 537 votes. So it wasn't Democrats' fault. It was Jeb Bush stealing an election.
How about C, both A and B?
Okay. Yeah. No, I just want whenever anybody, I think it's important that we all remind ourselves of that over and over and over again. That was a stolen election.
Well, I think,
not to mention the Supreme Court's role.
Every election since then that Republicans have used to get in the White House has been a stolen election. 2016 and obviously last year.
Yeah, well, in 2016 they used the Russians, and last year Elon Musk handed the election to Trump between X and his $250 million. Yeah, I'm not disputing that.
I remember Katherine Harris well, but there were also 90,000 Floridian Democrats who voted for Ralph Nader.
That's correct. But those were Green Party, people. I mean, Green Party people should have the right to vote for the Green Party candidate, don't you think?
Well,
I realize that they hurt us, but
do they have the right to poison the Supreme Court for decades to come?
Yeah, no, I get how they shot themselves in the foot, and I remember when my colleague Randy Rhodes had Ralph Nader on her program, and she kept saying, we can't afford you, Ralph. I'm sorry, we're not going to go for it. That wasn't the 2000 election. I think that was the 2012 election when Ralph ran again. But and I wrote an op-ed about that and about how Jill Stein was, if Jill Stein had not been on the ticket, if all those votes for Jill Stein had gone to Hillary Clinton in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have been president. And Ralph sent me back a nasty email going, rah, 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 rah. But I stand by it. I stand by it. But and I get your point, Jeff. Anyway, Jeff, I'm out of time. I'm sorry, I got to run. But thank you for the call. It's 49 minutes, almost 10 minutes before the hour. 49 minutes past. We'll be right back with you. It's Talk Media for the Sane Among Us. We'll be right back. Stick with us. thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. America is suffering from an epidemic of bullying. And one of the things we know is that culture, including bullying, flows from the top down. We've seen studies where when issues of, for example, being gay or transgender are being debated in the public, gay and transgender kids in school are more likely to be bullied. When racial issues are being discussed, people of minority races are more likely to be bullied. Well, now we've got a man who has literally built his career on being a bully, Donald Trump, as president, or was president, as candidate. And he is driving this insane bullying campaign and using it as a political weapon across the United States. And it's contagious. It's dangerous. There's an entire article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled America's New Epidemic, A Nation Overrun by Bullies. Check it out.
You're out in the streets, you're raising your voice, pushing back hard, 'cause there ain't no choice. You see the storm, you feel the weight, fighting for justice before it's too late. But even warriors need to rest, even lions lay down in their nest. Take a breath, take a break, don't let the fire turn to ash in its way. Keep the fire, find the light.
52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Tony in Shirley, New York. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? It's been a long time since we spoke. Real quick, two things. Number one, Mondani, I believe, is going to be the new picture of the Democratic Party, in my personal opinion, because he represents a lot of views that the growing majority definitely embrace. And I think that it's something that the old dog Democrats like Schumer and Jeffries, who still refuse to congratulate him, either need to embrace him or need to get out of the way.
I agree, although the one thing that they're now bashing him upside the head really hard with is the fact that he's Muslim. I mean, we're just seeing the ugly come out in the Democratic Party. It's really sad. But back to you, Tony.
It is. The second thing was, I'm seriously contemplating, I'm already looking into moving to Portugal. I'm a Hispanic male, I'm a citizen, but you've spoken to me before, you know that I'm in sales. I was the one I talked to quite some time ago. I refuse to sell to the gun industry anymore and supply them with any tooling. But that being said, because of what's going on lately, especially here on Long Island, there's ICE all over the place. Nassau County, the executive here has already authorized the police and to not only work with ICE, but he's already deputized citizens to also pulling over cars. So I don't even see my customers anymore because I'm literally living in fear. So now I'm at the point now with my wife, and I said, it's time to move to Portugal because I don't see any way out for the next couple of years. I don't see anybody in the Democratic Party that's going to be able to stand up and do something about this. And I'm in my mid-60s. I'm living in fear constantly, and this is not healthy.
I get it, Tony. One of my best friends, the former president of this network, Free Speech TV, that I'm on, has, with his wife, moved to Portugal. Greg Palast is spending an awful lot of time in Portugal because his director has moved to Portugal. I mean, I know people who've done that. Louise and I went over and visited them, and it's a beautiful country. I can't discourage you from it. I'm going to stay here. I've got family here. I love this country. I'm going to fight for this country. I realize that there are substantial risks associated with that. I get death threats. You wouldn't believe the crap I get. But
I know that.
But I'm going to stick around.
I know that the right-wing side, they throw unbelievable stuff at you, and I, you're in the public venue, so of course they're going to naturally go after you. But I mean, Now it's just like, because I'm brown-skinned and I have brown hair and a couple of tattoos, that's all they need. And, I had to go to a funeral, and I have to carry around my birth certificate, my Social Security card, and that doesn't ensure that I'm not going to be arrested.
Yeah.
I mean, the people that live across the street from me, they're both military personnel, both a husband and wife, 16 years. And when they first started these immigrant crackdowns, they started in Elizabeth, New Jersey, in a fishery up there. They grabbed a Vietnam veteran that happens to be their cousin. He spent 2 months in detention and finally got out of Louisiana a little over 2 months ago.
Wow. And was he a citizen?
He's a citizen and a veteran.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we're hearing more and more stories like this, that they're snatching up citizens.
And he showed them, he said, here's my VA card, and they didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, they just recently deported a Purple Heart recipient.
Yeah.
Sent him to South Korea. They said, go, get out of here.
Yeah.
They threw him out of the country.
Yeah, Steve Miller, if you're not white, get the hell out is, it's just become the mantra of this administration. Tony, I wish you the very best, and I hope if you do move, you'll stay in touch with us. And if you don't, that you'll stay here and fight with us. So,
I'll
Tony,
call you long distance, but either way.
Okay, I got to run, Tony. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. But I wish you very well. Thank you. Special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, student advocate Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Al Gorilla Rhythm, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verity, Martha Salinas, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels, all the fine folks who work on this program. Special thanks to you, too. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. Next 2 weeks, you're going to have Jefferson Smith here with you, taking good care of you, providing a great live program while I'm finishing up my book, The Last American President, which is now available for pre-sale. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Student Advocate puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmanReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmanreport.com.
We say fight back!